Hello, everyone. David Sawyer here, strategy guy for a better world. And wow, I hope you are as impressed with these amazing change makers as I am. Please give them another hand. And you know, the two organizations that brought us together tonight have such an important role to play. And it's more than Portland, you know, they're both huge players and attached to international networks. And I know I was the former ED of Social Venture Partners and helped launch Impact Entrepreneurs, as you heard. And I got on every website represented on the stage today just to remind myself of why I do the work I do. And it's important. Back in 1968, Marshall McLuhan said something that you might have heard. There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We are all crew. If you are a member of the crew, would you please stand up right now? Stand up if you're a member of the crew and give yourself a big hand. Come on, you need to stand up. Come on. And part of the reason you need to stand up is because this is the last 20 minutes, and you have held up through this whole thing, and God knows how much wine and beer you drank. And so we all met together, this group of people, and had a little powwow and agreed that boring panels are really boring. And I know no one there has ever experienced that, but we all have. And we decided that we were not going to have a boring panel for you. And what that means is quick questions, fast answers, provocative, real, authentic, fast-paced, and let's go. You ready? You all up for that? Yeah? So, there's a general question to the entire group. You know, Nelson Mandela famously said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Every single one of you, at some point, hit a wall where it was absolutely impossible. And with all due respect to the hoopla around social entrepreneurship, it ain't a picnic. You know, what was the big barrier for you? And I'd love to have, you know, just laser answers from each of you, because everybody out there, I'm sure, kind of connected to a different one of you. So let's hear it. What was the wall?
My accountant, who said, "When are you going to get funding?"
Definitely finances, especially as a youth-run organization full of high schoolers who've never run a social enterprise before. It was definitely funding.
I guess I'll speak to the sustainability, right? So we tend to view projects as drive-by projects. And I think what you really need is the stamina to stay at the game.
Come on, Jeremy.
Well, it's the barrier that we use today, which is having the right people and together to continue to grow the organization, keep growing as the organization grows. I mean, well, having a CEO who's never led an organization to this level, and all of us having to grow to that level, particularly in the countries and cultures that we're working in.
Nicely done. Very fast. I like it. So John Doerr, the famous venture capitalist, famously said, "Ideas are easy. Execution is everything." Does everybody out there know what I'm talking about? Right. And we don't want to lead anyone astray, because there's a whole bunch of change makers out there already, not just aspiring, but real. And I know a lot of the people out there, and you are already serious change makers. So it's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing to make idea reality. I would love to hear quick reflections from each of you on your key execution challenge in making your dream real.
I think it's the people. I was quite surprised the amount of time I spent on recruiting and having the right people with not a lot of incentive around money, but incentive around inspiration. And that's always the challenge when you're in the social entrepreneurship game.
When you're making things up as you go along, it's really hard to stay ahead of your team. That's been the biggest challenge.
Okay, so I think the biggest challenge for me was trying to recruit a team of both girls and boys who could fight for this issue, but then also grow it to a point where we could address as many women as possible. So we began as with the idea of directly distributing care packages, but we realized that this was such a pressing need that we actually had to expand really quickly within a span of 2 weeks. So for me, since we're starting, it's catching up with the need.
I think, to me, what's most exciting about the opportunity at DDD, for me particularly, is being this bridge between the top 1% and the bottom 1% of the world, and how do we together work together and collaborate. But when the reality of that is very difficult. We're talking about all of us who come from such different worlds, such different cultures, in terms of delivering to clients who have expectations, in terms of working together as colleagues, that challenge of kind of bridging the places that we come from on the spectrum.
Thank you all. So Greg Dees, who was, sort of the original advisor to Impact Entrepreneurs, and I used to joke with him when he was alive, he's passed now, the god of social entrepreneurship. He was the chief academic in the world promoting this field, and at the end of his life, he was understanding how the field of the heroic social entrepreneur is evolving. And all the work we do, heroic as it is, takes place within an ecosystem of other actors, and often actors from other sectors, and often networks. And both Impact Entrepreneurs and Social Venture Partners on their website consider themselves networks. And I'm sure each of you understand that you operate in the context of larger networks. And I'd love to hear how you think about that, and what are the most important things that happened in the evolution of your work that you didn't do yourself, that had to do with the partners that you engaged and who engaged you.
So I can start this one. So Champions of Care distributes care packages through a partnership network. So we have over 12 partners in 5 different states and 3 different countries. And basically, we haven't formed all of those partnerships. Of course, the first ones, it was me and my friends getting on the phone and calling and talking about our services. But other than that, the partners really talk to each other, and so they start spreading word about our services, and it's kind of this catalysm of different partnerships that sprout up.
So I think for me, it's Grameen. So it's a Grameen Intel venture. And it's kind of an interesting. I remember when we first demoed our eAgro software to Dr. Yunus, who's the chairman of the board. And he kind of listened to us for about 5 minutes, and he basically said, okay, this is all great, but what is the conversation you're having with the farmer? And trying to understand the incentive, the mindset, I think was a critical element that Grameen brought into the picture. And often we don't think about it. We try to go about things in a very technical way. And you really have to think about the mindset and the philosophy behind the people you're trying to impact.
ACE's Connection is a social network for people who are implementing or thinking about implementing practices based on the research. And what has just been joyous to me is having a place for people to tell their stories, whether it's their personal stories or the work that they're doing in their own communities. And also how this amplifies. So, for example, the story that I did about Lincoln High School, a documentary filmmaker named James Redford, Redford is the operative word there, did a documentary about Lincoln. He followed 4 students for a year, and it's premiering at the Seattle International Film Festival next week, and it is amazing. So it will, I think, galvanize even more people to change schools.
Well, there's been networks of other people and organizations that have been helpful. I was talking about at the end, this collaboration of people at DDD over time at all levels is really what shaped the organization. So it's hard to kind of separate exactly. One small anecdote, as I was telling you, our strategy of how our employees work half-time, 36 hours a week, get scholarships, and then go to school. Which sounds strategic, and I can tell you why that's a great stepping stone for people. What happened was on that first trip, I met 2 NGOs who were training people, and I said, why don't you each train 10 people? And so they each trained 10 people, and then we were trying to decide which 10 of the 20 to hire. And we couldn't decide, so we said, okay, let's hire all of them, they can each work half a day, and then somebody else said, who was sitting around, and then we said, well, what are people going to do the other half of the day? And someone else said, well, they can go to school. And so it was just that kind of evolution. And now I can tell you exactly why our work study model is innovative and brilliant. Indeed, Bill Herod pointed out that we should have people doing something else the rest of the day. So.
Thank you. So Kazi, we have 2 questions from the audience, one Twittered and one written for you, right? Laser answers. is Grameen Intel developing really low-cost tech for impact, really super bottom-up pyramid, affordable stuff?
The answer is yes, right? So if you look at the software, we typically sell it to entrepreneurs for about $10. But there's a balance, right? We try to keep it low cost, but we also have a charter to be a cost recovery company down the road. So we really have to figure out what the right price point is and what is the affordability. But the answer to your question is absolutely yes. These are about the base of the pyramid, low-cost solutions. And we're also fortunate that if you look at Moore's Law and kind of silicon, which is what Intel is so good at, is that the cost of computing has just come down, right? Today you can get a tablet for about $60. So you put it together along with the software, you have a tech solution at a very low price point.
Awesome. All right, here's a great question. How many poor farmers have smartphones?
Not a lot. And it depends. So in Bangladesh, for example, I think, and this is just an intuitive answer, I think it's less than 10%. So there are few, and they usually use it for like SMS type of apps. And because of that barrier, the social entrepreneur was so critical for us in our business model, right? So you have a person who's fairly educated, who's actually serving the farmers in his or her community. And so it's kind of a stopgap measure for us, is that you have the entrepreneurs serving the farmers, but we are not at this point assuming that all farmers will have smartphones.
All right, last question. This is going to be the hard one, though. So Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., said, the means we use must be as pure as the ends we seek. And if those of you in the room, I'm sure, and all of us are following that whole conversation, what's your end game? As you start your social enterprise or social entrepreneurship, what's your end game? Do you seek government adoption? Do you seek large-scale programmatic implementation? You know, do you seek the spreading of an idea like the end of punishment? Rather than the expansion of an organization, do you seek a change in the meme, you know, the idea of what's right in a civilization, like human trafficking is not right? And so the question is, what's your end game? If you succeed brilliantly beyond your wildest expectations, and you end your life on this earth knowing you have made the highest contribution you could have made, what will have happened because of the work you do? And feel free to blue sky it a little bit.
So ACE scores are really high in almost every community. They're much higher than the ACE study shows because that was 20 years ago, and this is an epidemic that has had no intervention until just in the last couple of years and in very few places. So what I would like to see is that communities have people where their highest ACE score is 3 and their average ACE score is 1. That would be amazing, and that would change everything, because what happens when you don't need 500 policemen, you only need 200, and do their jobs change? And do you train more people to be Parks and Rec directors? Or, you know, what does it look like? And that's my goal, is to see that. I might have to be a vampire if that's really going to happen, but, you know, I want to see it.
Come on, Nadia, let's hear it.
Okay, I think if Champions of Care succeeded brilliantly, the end game would be that we wouldn't need to do our work anymore. It would be that menstruation was kind of acknowledged as not just this women's issue, but it was labeled as more of a natural need that everyone should think about and everyone should care about, because at this point in time, it doesn't have any government funding. It doesn't have any funding for organizations to provide these services. So the end game would be that acknowledgement that this is something that more than half of the population in our world experiences. And it's something that holds girls back in developing countries from going to school and making that development and really spurring forth that global change. So if we succeed, it would be that we spread that idea of this being a natural need, not a women's need, so that we don't have to do our work anymore.
I'll start with an observation, and then I'll answer your question. I guess the one aha I had in terms of the population base we were trying to impact is they are all capitalists. And by the way, I'm not a Republican, but and the thing that dawned on me was that you really have to, when you look at a solution, you really have to look at it from the perspective from the end user, the people you're trying to improve their livelihood, and kind of what their ROI. What that really means is my end state is I have a company which has 30 employees. I got to have a cost recovery model here, so I'm not reliant on funders' money on an ongoing basis. What it means for the social entrepreneurs who are serving the communities they serve is they need to be sustainable. They need to have a same cost recovery model and have excess cash surplus that you know, they can afford all the day-to-day things. And for the farmer, it means increased income, right? So they're able to kind of go about their lives beyond the $3 per day and improve their lot. So having a sustainable model for me is the end state across all these three stakeholders.
Amen.
When we started DDD, we started as a nonprofit, and I guess the topic for another panel on structuring, social enterprises. But the reason we did that was because the founding principle wasn't about creating wealth for the founders, but was having about a social change. And at the highest level, that was about how do we live in a world where everyone, wherever they're born, has equal opportunity to realize their potential. How do they have opportunity to access education, to healthcare, to employment? And so that's obviously a broad goal that we feel like we're acting within, as many people here and around the world are. And to us, that's the ultimate end state. In our particular work, the way we see it is that we're one of the pioneers of this field we now call impact sourcing, impact outsourcing. How do you have social impact through outsourcing work? And so we both have our goals for our organization and what that will do for the broader industry, really. In terms of the broader industry, what we've helped catalyze is, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation has now launched a $100 million initiative 2 years ago called Digital Jobs Africa. How do we bring these kinds of opportunities to Africa? And so what we're hoping to do is for this kind of innovation to affect the whole outsourcing industry. How are all firms in that thinking about how are they hiring more marginalized populations and more disadvantaged youth they wouldn't otherwise? So that's the change that we'd like to see. We think that will then give opportunities and realize this higher goal. For ourselves, it's really about how can we prove that this model works, that this could be done sustainably with some of the world's poorest citizens and really deliver high quality work for clients. So we hold ourselves up. We cover 85% of our revenue, of our expenses through revenue, which is a great metric by some. But to us, the goal is how do we cover all of that in a sustainable, ongoing way.
Lovely, thank you. So by way of closing, I want to dedicate a quotation to the four of you, to Mark and Cindy and Social Venture Partners and Impact Entrepreneurs, and to everyone in the audience. Beautiful quote by a man named Richard Berger. Acknowledge all those who give their lives in the pursuit of a high purpose, transforming the unbearable discrepancy between the way things are and the way things ought to be. Thank you all so much.